Making really nice nougat is more about the method and the ingredients than it is about a recipe. Unless I do a recipe every day, I like to grab it and diagram it out. I write down all the key points so that while I'm making it, a really complex recipe or method can be followed along in my mind and on the paper. I print it out and I keep it nearby because I no longer need the recipe itself and the amounts because I have all of the deli cups full of the ingredients and I've already double checked them. I group them together into ingredients that go where. The egg white and the little bit of sucrose go on the whip on low, very low, just to foam it while I bring the water and sugar and eventually the honey and the glucose syrup up to 149 degrees Celsius. I put the water in the pot first and then melt the sucrose. I am not bringing the temperature up and cooking that yet. And I am doing in the microwave 5-second blast to melt gently the cocoa butter. Now, once I get all of the particles of the sucrose dissolved, I'm gonna throw the honey and the glucose syrup in the microwave for 5 seconds for easy release and then add it to the pot. And then I'm gonna turn up the heat and use the thermometer. Now, because there are a lot of impurities in the honey, it's gonna foam a lot more than it normally would if you were just using sucrose and glucose. So I turned the temperature down just a tiny bit until some of that burned out and it was very steamy. But you can see the beautiful color and you can see that I keep the thermometer tip moving because the temperature is different all around the pot. I pull it off the heat and make sure that it's not going to splatter because I brought it up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit and that could burn me, so got to be very careful with hot syrup. Now it starts out as a meringue, and when you are pouring that hot syrup into that tiny amount of egg white, you want to pour it along the side of the bowl, not hitting the whip, but that heat will make it so that you don't get strands of sugar. Now, once that meringue turned into a bit of a taffy, I switched to a paddle and I'm adding the cocoa butter in thirds and maybe even slower, but I needed to incorporate, so I have to use a firm scraper to get the nougat that stuck to the edges of the bowl off. This is what's called a whipped batter confection. It's very expensive because of its ingredients. I'm going to put roasted pistachios and almonds and whole dried cranberries. It's very beautiful. The hardness is determined by how hard you cook the syrup, but also by how much cocoa butter you add. And a lot of recipes don't even use cocoa butters. That's a little unusual and something to consider. Pastry shops make things like nougat to do a point of purchase sale. They're expensive, but you can get someone's bill up just by wrapping them in candy wrapper, cellophane, and putting them in a pretty jar at the counter and charging a premium price. This obviously requires some training, so it's not an unskilled job, but the results are so beautiful it's worth teaching someone in your shop how to do a nougat from scratch. Now the rice paper is on the top and the bottom and it barely stuck to the pan. I did not have to oil that pan. And as you can see, it just snaps when cut. It rested overnight. I am going to wrap this in parchment and give it as gifts, and I recommend you do the same.